Hi, my name is Heather Rule. I am the technical manager for TEC H.B. Fuller.
And I'm Chris Kane. I'm the digital technical manager for H.B. Fuller TEC. I wanted to thank you guys and this brave young man in the front row, all to himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right here. Let's give him a hand. So when we need a volunteer, he's ready.
Yeah.
So thank you guys seriously for sticking around on day 3. And even all the way in the back, this guy here. How's it going, Mike? Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. So it's the last day for demos. I don't even remember what we're doing.
You don't? Well, okay, so let's start off with like a recap. We talked about a lot of new products last year. What was kind of the key takeaway, the key product, that we did last year?
Well, last year we talked about our new motor innovation, the Total Flex 110 and 150.
Real quick, what does 110 and 150 stand for? Like, what's the difference between the two?
One meets ANSI standard.
A118.11. I bet that's the 110, you guys. Let's put 2 and 2 together.
And if anybody want to take a guess at what the 150 stands for?
The price? No, that is a good guess. That is a good guess. I wish. No, the Total Flex 150 meets ANSI A118.15. So it's 2 different performance classes of mortars that we talked about last year, but they're definitely very similar aside from those bond strengths. What were the key takeaways on those products?
Well, we like to call it a universal mortar. So that means you can use it inside, outside, wet, dry, submerged, floors, walls, pretty much any substrate, any type of tile. The only real limitation is we say you can use it for glass tile as long as it's 4x4 or smaller.
All right, one of the other limitations on glass only is that it is for intermittent water exposure. So the reason that we allow the product to be used intermittent water exposure is so that you can do backsplashes, you can do shower accent walls, and you don't have to worry about switching between a glass mortar and a porcelain mortar. Now, that's a glass limitation only. If you're just setting porcelain tile, exactly what Chris said. Interior, exterior, submerged, walls, floors, kind of the world is your oyster. What about different substrates? Do we have any challenging substrates that we can use it to bond to?
It bonds to pretty much anything. Probably the question we get asked most about is about uncoupling membranes, and it can be used over and under anybody's uncoupling membrane.
Provided you use their instructions.
Good point, and
industry standards.
Another good point. So if you do everything right, we will warrant the bond above and below anybody's uncoupling. You don't have to register it. You don't have to call us. The warranty is online. You just, like I said, we warrant the bond, and it's been out a year, and everybody loves it.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things about that product is that it is an unsanded product, okay? So there is no intentionally added silica. Because of that, it does behave a little bit differently than a traditional mortar, which means when you're installing it with those uncoupling membranes, checking coverage might look a little bit different just because of how it behaves. You're more checking for transfer and the transfer of moisture necessarily than like a stippling effect. So it's something to be aware of. It's a new mortar, it's new technology, and it might not behave exactly the way you might expect.
But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just, like Heather said, it's a little bit different. And once you realize that and you see it, no worries.
Go. Okay, so I hate to say that's old news, but that was last year's product demonstration. What are we going to talk about this year?
We're going to talk about our new adhesive, and we're calling it Total Flex XMS. And it's a universal adhesive that can go on walls. It can go over pretty much any substrate, including metal. We really kind of designed it for glass tile without the limitation of the 4x4 or, that. The cool thing about it is it's an adhesive that's rated to go inside, outside, wet, dry, and it can also be submerged.
So it's really weird you use the word adhesive, because when I think of a mortar, that's not normally like what I think of, an adhesive.
Well, it's definitely not a mortar. It comes in a pail.
Okay, so it's like a mastic.
That's what a lot of people will say, but it is definitely not a mastic. Even though, and you'll notice I'm pulling a plastic off the top, and it may look like a mastic a little bit, but that's kind of where the comparisons end. A mastic needs air to cure, and we all heard about, somebody sticking a 24 by 24 tile in the middle never cures because air never gets there. This is a moisture cure, and it's an adhesive, and with mastics, you're limited to where you can go. Can't go over waterproofing, can't go in a pool.
Okay, so for this to be able to go over waterproofing, the way it cures isn't through drying. Mastics dry, right?
Absolutely.
So this sounds a lot like one of those MS adhesives. MS adhesives are modified silane adhesives. They react with moisture in the air, okay? The name of this product is Total Flex XMS. You'll notice the MS stands for exactly what I just said, modified silanes. So, again, instead of drying like a mastic would, these particular products react with moisture in the air. And down here in Orlando, we definitely have enough humidity in the air to cause that reaction to kind of start to kick off. And that means that you can use it in all these places that Chris was telling us about. You could use it interior, you could use it exterior, you could use it submerged in a pool. I think probably one of my favorite ways to describe the versatility of this product is just to show one of these demo boards. You guys will notice we've had this here all week. That's a direct bond to metal, all right? There's no primer needed for it. You're actually able to set all of these different types of tile. And if you guys want to come up and check out the specific different types, you can come up here after our presentation. But basically it's glass, porcelain, ceramic, natural stone, anything you can think of. So as you can tell, it's got a little bit of a different feel than a mastic. Normally mastics are going to be a little bit looser. They're going to be a little bit, you can't use quite as big of a trowel notch. So you'll notice Chris is able to really well control the product that we're applying. Chris, we talked about this being good for pools. Does that mean it's really good for mosaics? Because you can use it for glass in pools?
It's great for glass in pools, mosaics, and if you caught me earlier, I said without the limitation of the 4x4. So we can go a little bit bigger than 4x4.
Just a little bit bigger? How big are we going to go?
Most people would be happy if we could go 5x5, 6x6.
Right, so for those of you guys that don't know, glass tile is considered large format once you get more than 6 inches on any side. A little bit different than porcelain. Porcelain, that limitation is about 15 inches. So glass, just due to the thermal expansion and contraction and the fact that it's real tricky to bond to, has a little bit different limitation. So Chris, you set a 12 by 12 tile here. That's like twice the length of a large format glass tile.
That's what I could find.
That's what you could find, okay.
So 12 by 12, no problem. And yeah, we're not limited. And you can see, if you noticed, I only troweled the substrate. I did not back butter it. You don't need to. And if we had a little bit more time, if we were doing a real job, we would want to tap this down or use a vibrating tool. But you can see I can knock down the ridges just by moving this. But we could do it better if we had more time.
Right, so that actually reminds me a lot of the gauge porcelain panel installation method. So while this product was originally designed to install glass, you can actually use it not just for any of the tile that are on that small sample board, but you can also use it for any tile all the way up to gauge porcelain panels. And that's interior and exterior. So it actually meets an ISO standard, which is a little different than the ANSI standards, but it meets the ISO standard for an exterior for an exterior tile adhesive. So, Chris, do you think we could install like a porcelain tile? I don't think we need to go gauge porcelain panels.
Well, I want to say something about the gauge porcelain panels. And how tall are you?
5 foot, without the heels.
Without the heels. So the way I like to describe it is this will do a gauge porcelain panel, 1 heather by 2 heathers.
So that's 5 feet by 10 feet.
1 heather by 2 heathers.
That feels like an American measurement standard. You know what I mean? We're not going to go metric. It's just 1 heather by 2 heather.
I stand by my measurement.
I said what I said. So just due to our size limitations here, we only have a 3 by 5 board, right? We're maybe going to do a slightly smaller porcelain tile. How big are we going to go?
We're going to do a 12 by 24, but it's not gauged. So even though it's a 12 by 24, it's probably got the weight of a 24 by 48 or so.
Okay.
So we're going big.
Go big or go home, man. So one of the things that I do like to kind of talk about with these adhesives is they are moisture cure, which means that they need to have access to moisture to react and to cure. So if you're going to be setting a gauge porcelain panel, what we actually recommend for those larger tile is that you actually use a sponge to wipe down your substrate. Okay? Now what you're doing is that works really well for mortars, okay? But it works really well for mortars in a different way. If you do that and you're using a traditional cementitious mortar, wiping down your substrate helps remove contaminants, and it also helps give the substrate a drink. That helps keep the moisture in your mortar, which helps give you a longer working time, a longer open time, just all around gives you a much better experience on the job site. With this new MS adhesive, it actually uses that moisture to cure. Okay? So wiping down your substrate actually helps cause it and force it to react, right? Because that product, this adhesive, is going to cure with that moisture in the air. It's not drying, it's reacting. And again, that's the difference between a mastic and an adhesive like this. So, Chris, I feel like that's, a pretty good sized tile. I don't think we could even go bigger than that, do you?
I don't know if we can go bigger or not, but I know we got a lot of room left on this.
Yeah, it would be a shame to waste all that space.
And hopefully we've got the time to do a little bit more.
Well, I think we started that. Yeah, I think we got the time. Isn't it always nice to watch someone else do a little bit of work? Anybody else? You're used to troweling all day, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I'll sit back. I'll watch someone else do it for me.
And if you notice, the guy I had lined up to volunteer
is gone.
Ugh. So I was gonna call him up here to check out his trawling technique.
He knew. He skedaddled. He said, you know what? I don't need this. I've done enough troweling in my life. I think I'm good to go.
Yeah. And then we got the guy in the back row that could do this very easily, but he's the farthest away from us.
I wouldn't want to make him walk all the way up here. I know that's a long walk. You might trip. It could hurt, And
then we got a shower guy leaning up against the table that would be done by now.
Is this why we don't pay you by the hour to do tile jobs? I feel like we would lose a lot of money if we did that.
Well, I like to tell people, I can make a board look halfway decent, but you don't want me doing your shower.
Just halfway?
Well, it'll stick.
That's a lot of mortar you're troweling out there. How big this? I'm curious where we're going with this.
1 heather by 2 heathers.
1 heather by 2 heathers. And again, I just want you guys to notice the difference between this and like a traditional mastic product. You've got a lot more body, a lot more weight and thickness to it. All right? So you can see that we're not seeing it run down the wall. We're not seeing, if you guys can come up close, you'll be able to see after the demo. We're getting really, really nice ridge retention with this. We're using a pretty good size V-notch trowel. You can also use a square or a smaller V-notch trowel, Euro trowel, or a slant notch trowel, depending on what type of tile that you are setting. As we all know, depending on the type of tile you're setting, the environment that you're setting it in, right, you might need to get different coverage, percentages. So you want to make sure that you're picking out a trowel that will get you the proper coverage based off of the size that you're setting, right?
My guess is we could hang a heather by this, but she won't let me do that.
No,
Our HR department won't let us do that.
I like my clothes in the shape they're in. My goal is not to get hot garbage adhesive on it.
So.
Is that a 24 by 48 glass tile?
It is.
Are you kidding me?
So it's 1.5, 2 heathers by 80% a heather.
You're going between 1.5 and percentages. You can tell it's the last day of the show when we start doing that. You okay?
Yeah.
All right, so we were able to get it in the shape of Nevada. Unfortunately, that is not the state that we are in. However, if you have a panel that does not have a crack in it, you are actually able to set pretty much any size glass panel. We've tested it all the way up to a 24 by 48 size panel of glass with this. You could also obviously do up to a gauge porcelain panel, which is a, 5 foot by 10 foot panel.
You can do 5 foot by 10 foot.
All right. So we have a product right now that, kind of to summarize, you need to make sure that you're getting full coverage. You okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you gotta make sure that you are getting full coverage underneath your tile. One of the ways you're gonna do that is make sure that you've picked the proper trowel. and you also need to make sure you're doing proper substrate preparation, right?
Yeah, and as TEC, we're part of HB Fuller, so we've got full line of surface prep from patch, primers, self-leveler,
Grouts,
mortars, adhesives.
Right? And I'll tell you that when you use a system like that, you are going to get a longer and stronger warranty. You'll actually get a system warranty when you use the full suite of products. We would love to have you guys come over and test out our TotalFlex XMS. A recap on that particular adhesive, it is a universal adhesive that is mainly used for walls. It can also be used on shower floor mosaics. It can be used interior, exterior, on glass tile, on gauged porcelain panels. And remember, it is not a mastic, okay? This is an adhesive that reacts with moisture in the air. So you're actually able to use it in all of those multiple different areas, all right? So, I would love it if you guys would come over and stop by our TEC booth right there, and we can get you a You Bet Your Glass It Sticks t-shirt. Come on by, we would love to talk with you guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and we hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show.